Chapter 11. More questions than answers. The dawn was fast approaching as Glenn stepped off the boat back onto the reassuring feeling of solid ground. The trip back across the water from the mount had indeed been a harrowing experience, and one that he certainly didn't want to repeat any time soon. In fact, he was pretty sure that he'd left his stomach somewhere back on the boat, and it took him a few minutes before the churning sensation settled back down. The quayside was still awash with press and local spectators, all eager to keep abreast of any new developments. Trying to keep a low profile, he kept his head down as he wandered up the cobbles, stopping briefly to find out from one of the police constables keeping the crowd at bay whereabouts the super was currently hiding. "I think he's in the MSI unit. Last I heard, they'd managed to get hold of Lord St. Leven." "Who?" He's Jackson Aubyn's father, but his title is Lord St. Leven. What is it with this country and your bloody titles? It's a wonder anybody can keep track of anything here. Yeah, it does get a bit confusing if you're not used to it, the PC chuckled at Glenn's baffled look. Thanks, Glenn added as he left the PC to his duties and headed off back towards the MSI unit. What the hell happened to you? You look like a drowned rat. I've been inundated with questions from the vultures for the last few hours, the superintendent stated in a rather gruff tone as Glenn entered the unit. Sorry, boss. Got a little bit stuck on the rock. I now know what it feels like to be a castaway. Well, now that you're back from your holiday, maybe you can enlighten me as to what we know. Glenn didn't really appreciate the super's tone, but he understood that he must be under a great deal of pressure from several different directions to get to the bottom of the recent string of events. Well, I can't add much to what I already told you earlier, apart from that we've found a piece of evidence that might help us, but I need to make a few calls before I can say for sure whether it's a lead or not. I hear you've made contact with the father? Yes, he's cancelled his holiday and will be back within hours, so I suggest that whatever calls you need to make, you better get on with it, because I can promise you that when he gets here, there better be something tangible to tell him, otherwise you and I are going to be walking on some very hot coals indeed. I understand. Good. Has Jim given any indication of when the autopsy is likely to take place? Not yet. He's having to wait for the weather to settle. They can't move the body in this. Sure he'll move it as soon as he can. Yes, I can see he's on a pretty sticky wicket, as he would say. Oh well, some things are out of our control. Haven't you got some calls to make? The super said, in a rather softer tone than his initial greeting. Boss, it's 6 in the morning. As much as I would like to, somehow I don't think people that I need to call are going to be in at this time in the morning. Well, I'm sure you can find something productive to do. You better go get yourself a coffee or something. Oh, and try and put something together that I can tell these flaming vipers. I swear if I see one more reporter in here, you may have to put me in handcuffs. Yeah, no worries. I think I can do that. What did the state workers say? Oh, not a lot. Just that it was his night off. His description of Jackson Aubyn matches the body, so it seems very likely that it is him. He was surprised that Jack was at the castle. According to him, Jack was on business in London and hadn't been expected back for some time. Normally the household staff is made aware in advance that family members will be resident, so not a great deal of help really. You better make a start on your report. I'm intending on giving a full press briefing at 9. Hopefully that will get the vermin off our backs for a while. Where's the nearest place for a decent coffee? Machine's in the back. Can't say it's decent, but it's hot. And try to smarten yourself up a bit before 9. Can't have you looking like that. Better ring the wife of yours as well. Bet she'll be having kittens by now. Ah, no way. Totally forgot to ring her earlier. We'll be in the doghouse now for sure. Hopefully she'll get over it and drop off some dry clothes too. Just get a squad car to pick some up or something. Don't think she would like to be around here. Knowing her luck, she'll turn up just as the body's being moved. Then you really would be in the doghouse. Definitely not a sight for young ladies to witness. Yeah, I don't think she would appreciate that, Glenn replied, as he made a move in the direction of the coffee machine. The super was right. The coffee was like ditch water, but Glenn didn't care. Anything hot was good right about now. The cold was beginning to set in as he sat shivering in his wet clothes. He hadn't really noticed it earlier, but then he'd been busy working, whereas now he was just sitting trying to write up his notes into something tangible that the super could use for the press. The heater on the wall of the cabin next to him helped a bit, but it wasn't the best in the world, and certainly wasn't going to dry him out by 9. It wasn't long before he plucked up the courage and rang home. "Hey, hun. How are you? Hope the little one didn't take too long to get back to bed." "No, he was fine. You sound tired. Everything okay down there?" "Yeah, been a long night, and probably gonna be an even longer day. A lot going on down here. But I'm fine," Glenn said with a sigh, deciding not to tell her about the injury to his side. It wasn't an outright lie, because he was feeling fine, if a little cold, wet, and bruised. He just didn't want her to worry, and so had made his mind up that he could deal with the repercussions later. "Any chance you could put some clothes together for me? I've got a little wet down here. Oh, and a towel would be handy." "Oh, honey, you poor thing. Sure. Anything in particular? I can drop them off in a bit if you like." Just another suit be good. Got a press conference at 9. Don't worry about dropping them off. One of the squad cars will swing by to pick them up." "You sure? It won't be any trouble. We'll only take 10-15 minutes tops." "It's a bit busy down here. You'll struggle to park. And they may be about to bring the body from the island, so I don't think it's really the right time to come across. No, I think I'll get the guys to pop over." "Anybody we know?" "Not really, but can't talk about that right now." "Well, whatever you prefer, as long as you're okay." "All good. I'll see you in a bit, hon." "Okay. Just promise me you'll try and get some rest at some point. You've been up for hours." "I'll be fine, hon. I can sleep later. Talk to you soon. Love you." "Love you too. Mwah." Glenn didn't like not telling her everything, but he knew that if he'd told her about the injury, there would have been an endless string of questions, followed by the mandatory mini-lecture on how he should take more care of himself, not to mention the line about now that he was a father, he shouldn't be putting himself in harm's way quite so often. All of which he knew would happen later, and with a great deal more ferocity, but it was still a conversation he preferred to have at home in person than over the phone, especially as at that precise moment he would need to concentrate on where the evidence was going to take him, let alone what details he needed to cover for the press conference. Looking down at the scrawled notes he was trying to put into some more ordered format, Glenn's frown deepened. It didn't seem like much, just a brief section on the body and the broken tomb, coupled with a few lines on the rest of the scene. The specifics about the ring and the ammunition he was going to omit at this stage. These were details that didn't need to be made public at that point. It was still very thin, but it was just one of those difficult cases that popped up from time to time, testing the police's ability to gradually piece the fragments into something more concrete. As frustrating as it was, he almost found it intriguing and exciting. It wasn't very often that he was presented with a puzzle that seemed to raise more questions than it provided answers. and that seemed to be pulling him towards the upper echelons of power. He wondered if this could end up being a career case, one of those that can make or break you. He hoped it would be the former, but only time would tell which outcome he was destined for. The significance of the ring still played heavily on his mind, but he knew that he'd have to wait until the College of Arms opened before he could follow that particular line of inquiry. He tried to Google the Latin motto that was on the ring, but unfortunately, apart from confirming that its meaning was indeed what Becky had suggested, truth and hope, he couldn't find any family coat of arms referenced as having that particular phrasing, or there was so many family coats of arms, crests and emblems, etc., that contained squirrels that he had to stop looking, otherwise he was likely to go a little bit nuts himself. He also couldn't fathom out what Jack was doing there if he was meant to be on business in London. And why hadn't he told any of the staff that he would be resident? "Glenn, sorry to disturb you," one of the other DIs said, interrupting his train of thought. "There's a PC here with your change of clothes and a coffee, compliments of the desk sergeant." "Well, better late than never, I suppose," Glenn replied, referring to the promised coffee from a good 6 hours ago. "What time is it?" "8:30. "Oh, no way. Totally lost track of time. Right, okay. Can you scan these and give a copy to the super while I change?" "Yeah, sure. Anything else you need?" "Not at the moment. Just tell him I'll give him a quick briefing before he talks to the press. Where's he planning on holding it?" "The Godolphin Arms. It's the only venue big enough at short notice." "Okay, tell him I'll be over shortly," Glenn replied, as he took the parcel of clothes, dashing into an empty interview room in which to quickly change. Glenn felt slightly naked as he emerged from the interview room, having put on the fresh clothes. His almost trademark Harris tweed overcoat was still too wet to wear, and without it he felt incomplete. Maybe it was just because he was so used to the extra weight, and without it he felt something was missing, or maybe it was because he felt it was like an invisible shield, keeping him apart from all the nastiness that he encountered on an almost daily basis. Whichever it was, at this moment in time, he felt uneasy, almost vulnerable. He certainly noticed the biting cold as he left the MSI unit and made his way over to the Godolphin Arms, pushing his way past the horde of reporters and photographers, all waiting to be allowed into the building. "You ready for this?" the super asked, as Glenn entered the bar-cum-restaurant area that had been rearranged for the press conference. A long trestle table had been set up at one end, facing row upon row of currently empty seats. "Ready as I'll ever be. Anything you want to know before you start?" "No, your notes are clear enough. Just follow my lead. I'll deal with the questions. You just sit there and do what you do best," the super added, before turning to a sergeant on the door. "Okay, Sergeant, let's get this over with. You can let them in now." "Ladies and gents, you can come in now. Please take your seats. The press conference is about to begin. All questions will be answered in due course," the sergeant announced to the crowd now jostling to get through the doors. "Come on, let's have a bit of order here. There's room for everybody, and it's not going to start until you are all ready. So there's no need to push," the sergeant added as they tried to surge past him into the room. "Thought you Brits were meant to be good at queuing," Glenn whispered in the ear of the super, sitting next to him as he watched the undignified behaviour of all the reporters as they battled with each other to get the best seats. "Ah, this lot, you've got to be joking. I've seen wild dogs with better manners," the super muttered back. He had half thought about saying it just loud enough for the closest members of the press to hear, but had thought better of it at the last moment. He didn't want to get off on the wrong foot. He'd been through too many of these in his time to know just how careful you had to be. These people would pick up on anything, the slightest show of weakness, and they could crucify you, twisting your words so much that by the time they hit print, you wouldn't be able to recall if that was or wasn't what you had said. Mind your step with this lot. They have their uses, but just be very careful, the super added. Right, ladies and gentlemen, and, of course, Mr. Ladyman, the super jokingly opened, breaking the tension in the room and causing laughter to spread across the crowd. He knew it was a serious occasion, but he was also well aware that he needed to get them on his side from the start if he was going to have any chance of controlling the flow of information afterwards. Are the rumours true about Jackson Auburn? Is he dead? A lady's voice called out from the back. Geraldine, you know how this works. We will answer questions later. For now, just let me tell you what we know, the super replied, before continuing to brief the press on what they believed had happened and what they had discovered upon arriving at the Mount. Glenn's mind began to wander about halfway through the super's briefing. He'd been over this so many times by now that he didn't really need to listen, and his mind was still on the ring, the coat of arms, and what the College of Arms might be able to tell him. It was only the slight kick of the super's foot against his ankle that snapped him back into the room as the briefing was beginning to draw to a close and the flurry of questions from the floor began. So, can you confirm the rumours of Jackson Auburn? Geraldine asked, repeating her question from before. At this time we cannot confirm this. The body has yet to be formally identified. As soon as we know, we shall release a statement. What line of inquiries are you following? And have you ruled anything out? Another asked. At this time we've not ruled anything out. There's still a great deal of evidence to process, and we are actively pursuing all lines of inquiry. Who's leading the investigation? I'm in overall command of the investigation. D.I. Harris here is the lead investigator. Isn't he a bit young? D.I. Harris has a lot of experience in the field and has worked on a number of cases of this nature. I feel very confident that he is the right man for the job. He has both mine and the force's full support. Can you confirm that there was more than one fatality? There's not enough evidence at this time to either confirm or deny this. Was anything taken from the castle? I'll let D.I. Harris answer this one, the super replied, dropping Glenn right into the mix. From what we have seen so far, nothing was taken from the castle. There is evidence to suggest that one of the tombs in the crypt was broken into, but at this stage we don't know if anything was taken. Are you saying this could have just been an act of wanton vandalism and a case of wrong place, wrong time? At this stage we cannot rule this out, Glenn replied, holding back the urge to run a finger around the collar, and he began to feel the stuffy heat of the room itch. He needed to keep his cool and not to look under pressure. Was this a gang-related shooting or an act of terrorism? Is there any danger to the public? We do not believe so, and we would urge the public to go about everyday activities. However, we would stress that if anybody does have any information that would help us in our inquiries, that they should come forward and not take matters or beliefs into their own hands, Glenn replied, stressing the point of contacting the police. I think this is enough for now. We'll keep you up to date as further developments occur. The super jumped in, bringing the briefing to a close. He desperately wanted to avoid the terrorism notion. He'd seen the effects of that sort of insinuation in small communities, and didn't want to have to deal with rogue members of the community carrying out their own witch hunt. That's it for now, folks. Please let us get on with our investigation, and as soon as we have a clearer picture, we will let you know, he added, as he stood and began to make his way out of the room, ushered by two PCs, struggling to keep the members of the press at bay as the room filled with the sound of so many fresh, unanswered questions. Glenn managed to slip out of the room unnoticed. Because of the rather abrupt ending of the briefing, all of the press's attention was now directed towards the super, and they totally forgot about him. He was glad that he didn't come under too much flack. It was true that he had been in enough of these briefings to be able to hold his own, but at this point in time, he just wanted to follow up with his lines of inquiry, and the sooner he could do this, the better.